Oh, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to my Tribulation Force channel. So I'm going to continue reading Chapter 19 of Left Behind. I'm up to page 355. Yeah, I'm up to page 355. Let's continue reading. I think it was a natural, some kind of phenomenon where all our high-tech stuff interacted with the forces of nature, and we really did a number on ourselves. Now come on, Cameron. Where are you on this? I'm in the perfect position for my assignment, he said. I haven't the foggiest. What are people saying? The usual. A doctor at O'Hare told me he was sure it was the rapture. Other people have said the same. Other people have said the same. You know our Chicago bureau chief, Lucinda Washington? It's going to be your job to find a replacement for her, you know. You'll have to go there, get lay of the land, get acquainted. What you were saying? Her son believes she and the rest of the family are taken to heaven. So how'd he get left behind? They're referring to Lionel from the Left Behind the Kids series. I'm not sure what the deal is on that, Buck said. Some Christians are better than others or something. That's one thing I'm going to find out before I finish this piece. This flight attendant who just called, I'm not sure what she thinks, but she said the captain she's meeting today thinks he has an idea. She said the captain she's meeting today thinks he has an idea. An airline captain, Bailey repeated. That would be interesting. Unless his idea is the same as the other scientific types? Well, carry on, Steve. We're going to announce this today. Good luck, and don't worry about anything we've said here finding its way into the magazine unless we get it through the other sources. We've agreed on that, aren't we, Williams? Yes, sir, Buck said. Steve didn't look so sure. Buck ran to the elevator and called information for the number of the PanCon Club. He asked them to page Hottie when they couldn't locate her. He assumed that she hadn't arrived yet or had gone out with her pilot friend. He left a message to have her call him on his cellular phone and headed that way in the cab just in case. His mind was whirring. He agreed with Stott and Bailey that the big story was what had been behind. His mind was whirring. He agreed with Stanton Bailey that the big story was what had been behind. He agreed with Stanton Bailey that the big story was what had been behind the disappearances, but he was also becoming suspicious of Nikolai Carpathia. Maybe he shouldn't be. Maybe he should focus on Jonathan Stonegal. Carpathia should be smart enough to see that his elevation could help Stonegal in ways that would be unfair to his competitors. But Carpathia had pledged that he would deal with both Stonegal and Todd Cawthron, knowing full well they were behind illegal deeds. Did that make Carpathia innocent? Buck certainly hoped so. He had never in his life wanted to believe more in a person. In the days since his disappearances, he hardly had a second to think for himself. The loss of his sister-in-law and niece and nephew were tugged at his heart almost constantly, and something made him wonder if there wasn't something to this rapture thing. At his heart almost constantly, and something made him wonder if there wasn't something to this rapture thing. If anybody in his orbit would be taken to heaven, it would have been them. But he knew better than that, didn't he? He was Ivy League educated. He had left the church when he had left the claustrophic family situation that threatened to drive him crazy as a young man. But he knew better than that, didn't he? He was Ivy League educated. He had left the church when he left the claustrophic family situation that threatened to drive him crazy as a young man. He had never considered himself religious, despite a prayer for help and deliverance once in a while. He had built his life around achievement, excitement, and, he couldn't deny it, attention. He loved the status that came with having his byline, his writing, his thinking in a national magazine. And yet, there was a certain loneliness in his existence, especially now with Steve moving on. Buck had dated and considered escalating a couple of serious relationships, but he had always been considered too mobile for a woman who had wanted stability. Buck had dated and considered escalating a couple of serious relationships, but he had always been considered too mobile for a woman who wanted stability. Since the clearly supernatural event he had witnessed in Israel with the destruction of the Russian Air Force, he had known the world was changing. Things would never be as they had been. He wasn't buying the space alien theory of disappearances, and while it was very well could be attributed to some incredible cosmic energy reaction, who or what was behind that? The incident at the Wailing Wall was another unexplainable bit of their supernatural. Buck found himself more intrigued by the whys and wherefore story, as he liked to think of it, than even the rise of Nikolai Carpathia. As taken as he was with the man, Buck had hoped. Buck hoped against hope that he wasn't just another slick politician. He was the best Buck had ever seen, but was it possible that Dirk's death, Alan's death, Eric's death, and Buck's predicament were totally independent of Carpathia? He hoped so. He wanted to believe a person could come along once in a generation who could capture the imagination of the world. Could Carpathia be another Lincoln, a Roosevelt, or the embodiment of Camelot that can indeed appear to some? On impulse, as the cab crawled into the possible traffic at JFK, Buck plugged his laptop modem into his cellular phone and brought up a news service on his screen. He quickly called up Eric Miller's major pieces for the last 2 years and was stunned to find he had written about the rebuilding and improvement in Babylon. The title of the Miller series was New Babylon, Stonegall's Latest Dream. A quick scan of the article showed that the bulk of the financing came from Stonegall banks throughout the world. And of course, there was a quote attributed to Stonegall, just coincidence. I have no idea the particulars of the financing undertaken by various institutions. Buck knew that the bottom line with Nicolae Carpathia would have nothing to do with the Guanti Nagumo or Israel or even the new Security Council. To Buck, the litmus test for Carpathia was what he did about Jonathan Stonegall once Carpathia was installed as Secretary General of the United Nations. Because the rest of the UN went along with Nicolae's conditions, he would become the most powerful leader of the world overnight. He would have the ability to enforce his wishes militarily. If every member were disarmed and the UN might were increased. The world would have to be desperate for a leader they trusted implicitly to agree to such an arrangement. Would have to be desperate for a leader they trusted implicitly to agree to such an arrangement. And the only leader worth the mantle would be one with zero tolerance for a murderous behind-the-scenes schemer like Jonathan Stonegall. Okay, so that's chapter 19 of Left Behind, the first book of the Left Behind series, Left Behind. Take care, everybody. Another video for my Storytime channel.